The words landed before I even knew I was holding my breath. "You'll regret this." She said it quietly, almost politely, like she was reminding me to pick up milk on the way home. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because something inside me finally understood that whatever came next would change everything. We were standing in the kitchen, the same narrow space where we'd once danced barefoot at midnight, laughing about nothing. Now the air felt tight, like it had been shrink-wrapped around us. She had her arms crossed, jaw set, eyes already halfway gone. I remember thinking how practiced she looked, like she'd said those words before. Maybe not to me, but to someone. Silence has a sound when you're married long enough. It hums. It presses against your ears. I could hear the refrigerator kick on, the clock ticking above the doorway, the faint buzz of her phone vibrating on the counter. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to. We'd been arguing about something small. It's always something small at first. A missed call, a late dinner, a tone. But small things don't carry threats. Small things don't end with ultimatums whispered like prophecies. "You're really not going to say anything?" she asked, one eyebrow lifting. Not curious. Challenging. I shook my head once. That was it. No shrug. No sigh. Just a single, quiet refusal. That's when her mouth tightened. That's when she leaned back against the counter like she'd already won. "Fine," she said. "Do what you want." I had loved this woman for 11 years. Loved her through job losses, miscarriages, a move across 3 states, and a version of myself I barely recognized anymore. I'd learned the difference between her tired silence and her dangerous silence. This was the second kind. Earlier that evening, I'd found myself standing alone in the driveway after work, engine still running, not quite ready to go inside. That should have been my first clue. Home had started to feel like a place I needed to brace myself for. Not loud, not violent, just tilted, like the floor was slowly slanting and I was the only one adjusting my footing. She used to tell me everything, or at least that's what I believed. Somewhere along the way, conversations turned into reports. Facts without feelings. Schedules without stories. When I asked how her day was, she answered like a witness, not a partner. I noticed the changes in pieces. Her phone never left her side. She angled the screen away from me, just slightly, like muscle memory. New passwords, new playlists, new laughter that didn't belong to our house. But suspicion is a lonely thing. You carry it quietly because saying it out loud feels like lighting a match in a room full of gas. So I swallowed it. I told myself marriages have seasons. That trust means patience. That love isn't always warm. That night in the kitchen, though, patience finally sat down and folded its hands. "You'll regret this," she'd said. And I believed her. Not because she was threatening me, but because I could hear the certainty in her voice. Regret, I realized, was something she thought she could assign. I picked up my keys from the counter. She watched me, eyes sharp now, measuring, waiting for a reaction. A plea. An apology she could dismiss. I gave her nothing. As I reached the door, she spoke again. "Don't walk away from me." I paused, not to turn around, just long enough to understand the truth hiding in that sentence. She wasn't afraid I'd leave. She was afraid I'd stop chasing. I opened the door and stepped into the night air. The cool hit my face, grounding me. Behind me, the house stayed quiet. No footsteps, no calling my name. And that was when it settled in. Heavy, undeniable. Whatever she thought I'd regret, she had already done something she assumed I'd never uncover. I closed the door softly, not knowing yet that this was the last quiet moment before everything I trusted would begin to unravel. I didn't go far that night. Just drove until the streets thinned out and the houses all started to look the same. Dark windows, closed curtains, lives paused behind glass. I parked under a flickering streetlight and turned the engine off, hands still on the wheel long after the silence settled. My phone buzzed once. Then again. I didn't check it. There's a strange clarity that comes when you stop reacting, when you don't defend yourself, when you don't beg to be understood. It's like stepping back and finally seeing the whole board instead of the piece you've been pushing for years. I thought about all the moments I'd overridden my instincts. The way she'd accuse me of being distant whenever I asked questions. How every concern I raised somehow became proof of my insecurity. I'd started apologizing just to end conversations. That should have scared me more than it did. I slept in the car that night, jacket folded under my head, watching condensation bloom on the windshield with every breath. Around 4 in the morning, my phone lit up again. This time I looked. You're really doing this? Come home. Then, minutes later, don't be dramatic. That one hurt more than the rest. Not because it was cruel, but because it was familiar. Minimizing had become her favorite language. When I finally went back the next afternoon, the house felt staged. Too clean. Too calm. She was sitting at the table with her laptop open, fingers moving fast, like she was already halfway somewhere else. She glanced up when I walked in, relief and irritation crossing her face in quick succession. So, she said, "Are you done?" I didn't answer right away. I set my keys down carefully, took my jacket off, sat across from her. The quiet stretched again, but this time I let it. "I know," I said finally. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. "Know what?" I watched her closely, the slight tightening around her eyes. The way her shoulders lifted, just a fraction. She was bracing, not confused. "I don't know everything," I said, "but I know enough." She laughed. A short, sharp sound. "Enough of what?" I leaned back in the chair. "Enough to understand why you're not afraid of losing me." That did it. Her smile faded. She closed the laptop slowly, like she needed both hands free for what came next. "You're imagining things," she said. "And before you spiral, let me stop you. Whatever story you're telling yourself." "I'm not telling myself a story," I interrupted. My voice surprised even me. Steady. Low. "I'm listening to the one you stopped telling me." Her jaw clenched. "You're being unfair." There it was. The familiar pivot. The word she used when cornered. I nodded once, like I was filing it away. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I just want you to know, I'm not going to fight for scraps anymore." She stood abruptly, chair legs scraping the floor. "So what? You're threatening me now?" I shook my head. "No. I'm deciding." She stared at me, searching for something. Anger, desperation, weakness. Whatever she'd always found before. When she didn't, her voice dropped. "You think walking away makes you strong?" she said. "You'll regret this." The same sentence. Different tone. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a promise. I stood up, matching her height, meeting her eyes. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to explain myself. "I already regret staying quiet when I shouldn't have," I said. "I won't regret this." I picked up an overnight bag I'd packed earlier and headed for the door. Behind me, she didn't follow. She didn't call my name. And as I stepped outside again, I realized something that sent a chill through me. Not fear, but resolve. She thought my silence was weakness. She had no idea it was preparation. I didn't disappear right away. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I stayed just close enough to observe, like stepping back into the shadows of a room you once lit yourself. I took a short-term rental across town. Cheap furniture. White walls. The kind of place that doesn't ask questions. At night, the quiet felt earned. No tension humming through the air. No careful phrasing. Just my own breath, steady again. She texted the next morning like nothing had happened. "We need to talk like adults. Running away doesn't solve anything." I stared at the messages for a long time before setting the phone face down. Not blocking her. Not responding. Silence, I was learning, was no longer avoidance. It was information. Days passed. Then a week. I went to work. I exercised. I slept better than I had in months. And slowly, painfully, patterns I'd ignored began lining up on their own. Late nights that didn't match deadlines. Weekend errands that took hours. Her sudden obsession with privacy framed as independence. One evening, curiosity finally outweighed restraint. I logged into our shared cloud account. The one she'd forgotten still synced to my tablet. I wasn't hunting for proof. I think, deep down, I was hoping not to find it. That hope didn't last long. It wasn't messages. She'd been smarter than that. It was calendars. Overlapping appointments. Names abbreviated. Repeating time slots that weren't work, weren't social, weren't anything she'd ever mentioned to me. And then there were the photos. Not explicit. Not dramatic. Just enough. Reflections in glass. Cropped frames. A man's shoulder I didn't recognize. Her smile, looser, lighter than I'd seen in years. The kind she used to save for me. I set the tablet down and sat there, hands clasped, feeling something unexpected rise up through the ache. Clarity. The phrase "you'll regret this" echoed again, but now it sounded different. Less like a threat, more like projection. She hadn't been warning me about my future. She'd been afraid of hers. I didn't confront her. I didn't send screenshots or demand explanations. I started moving quietly instead. Changed passwords. redirected my direct deposit, pulled copies of documents I'd trusted her to keep. It felt methodical, almost boring, which told me it was the right approach. When she finally called, her voice was softer than I expected. "Why won't you talk to me?" she asked. No anger, just confusion. "I am talking," I said. "Just not the way you're used to." There was a pause. I imagined her pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, trying to read between the lines. "You're punishing me," she said. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see it. "I'm protecting myself." She exhaled sharply. "From what?" I closed my eyes. "From pretending anymore." Another pause. Longer this time. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. And I believed she believed that. "I know," I replied. "But intent doesn't erase impact." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize either. Instead, she said the one thing that confirmed everything I needed to know. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. "You're going to regret this." I felt calm as I answered. Calm in a way that didn't need validation. "No," I said. "I already survived the worst part." After the call ended, I sat alone in that quiet room and understood something that felt almost like peace. Regret only works on people who still doubt themselves. And I didn't anymore. Whatever came next, whatever truth still waited to surface, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't running. I was positioning myself for what she never thought I'd have the strength to do. Walk away without looking back. The truth didn't arrive with fireworks. No confession, no dramatic breakdown. Just a quiet, undeniable collapse of the story she'd been telling, herself most of all. 2 weeks after our last call, she asked to meet. Neutral ground. A coffee shop halfway between our lives, like a negotiated border. I agreed, not because I needed answers, but because I wanted to see who she was when the leverage was gone. She was already there when I arrived. Same posture, same coat I'd bought her years ago. But something was missing. Not confidence, control. "You look different," she said, trying to smile. "So do you," I replied, and meant it kindly. We sat. Small talk tried and failed to take root. Finally, she folded her hands around her cup and looked straight at me. "I didn't think you'd actually leave," she said. There it was. Not "I'm sorry." Not "I hurt you." Just surprise. "I know," I said. Her eyes flickered. "I didn't think silence was your move." It wasn't, I admitted. Until I realized words were the only thing you still had power over. She swallowed. "You really don't want to fight for us?" I leaned back, feeling the weight of that question. Not heavy anymore, just familiar. "I did. For years. Quietly. Consistently. Alone." She looked away then. Out the window. At nothing in particular. "It just happened," she said. "I didn't plan it." "I know," I said again. And this time, it carried something final. That's when she said it. Soft, almost to herself. "I thought you'd regret this." I met her gaze, steady. "You weren't wrong." Her face tightened, hopeful. "So, I regret that it took me this long to choose myself." The hope drained from her expression, replaced by something raw and human. Loss. Not of me, exactly, but of the version of the story where she never had to face consequences. We sat there a few moments longer. Then she nodded once. "I guess this is it." "It is," I said. We stood. No hug. No anger. Just an ending that finally fit. That night, back in my quiet apartment, I unpacked the last box. Photos I didn't need anymore. Papers I'd kept out of habit. I didn't destroy them. I just filed them away where the past belongs. She never said "You'll regret this again." Because regret requires uncertainty. And I'd made peace with mine. What I learned, what stayed with me, is simple but hard won. Silence isn't weakness when it's chosen. Walking away isn't failure when staying costs you yourself. Sometimes the most powerful response isn't a defense or a demand or a final speech. Sometimes it's no response at all. Just the quiet confidence of a man who finally knows his worth and doesn't need to prove it to anyone.